Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it. Mark, welcome along.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Meet Jon. Jon, Mark. Mark, Jon.
Hi, Jon.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Jon. How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, not too bad.
Cool. Out the traps. This will be season 2, episode 1. Fingers crossed if everything works. So we've done a season, Jon. That's pretty good.
The difficult second season.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And yeah, we've got Mark along, who's a friend of mine I know through VWs and Porsches. So looking forward to listening to Mark's story. Yeah, if we jump into it, the first question we normally ask is, what's your earliest car memory?
Well, cars have always been a big thing for me. I've grown up around cars, as obviously as you're aware, Andy. And one of my earliest car memories is my dad's friend arriving at my mum and dad's house back in the 70s with a Reliant Scimitar. And it was one of those awful fiberglass things with at the Ford V6 in it. And he brought it there purely because he purchased it earlier that evening. And from my understanding, it had something wrong with it. I think it had a fuel leak. And he was driving it home, and he sort of drove it to mum and dad's. And obviously, in the 70s, we were a lot less, health and safety aware. The best thing they decided to do was take it for a test drive with me, probably about 3 or 4 years old, in the back without a seatbelt, drive it around the block to see if they could find what the problem was. So yeah, sitting there in a Reliant Scimitar that absolutely stank of petrol. And I remember it wasn't a particularly clean car, and obviously in the 70s everybody smoked. So the guy who was driving it had a cigarette on as well. So I can remember a car filled with smoke, stinking of fuel, while they drove around trying to diagnose, was it an overfueling problem? Was it actually a fuel leak? There was nothing underneath. Was it an internal fuel leak? So yeah, but I remember it being stiflingly hot. Now
that'd be the fire,
probably. Yeah.
Yeah. It could have been the fire about to happen. But so that was one of my earliest memories of actually being in a car. Funny enough, not my dad's car, but my dad's friend's car. And he always seemed to be around people that were car related. And I remember that we drove over to, I think it was Seaford that evening. He was living in Newhaven at the time, and we drove over to another friend of his who happened to be working in the garage on an MGTC. At the time. So I remember standing in the garage, and I remember this huge black dog at the time coming out, this huge black, I think it was a Labrador called Winston. And I remember being, taken from one ordeal, was stinking a smoke-filled, petrol-filled car to this huge black dog and this rotting MGTC to see this flaky wood problem that he had, where obviously the ash chassis had disintegrated. So yeah, I've grown up around cars, and I've always, Saturday used to be drag the ramps out onto the drive and put my pedal car up on the ramps and lay underneath it with my dad's Gia door socket set. So it's sort of, as you know, it sort of stuck with me and my brother. So that's probably one of my earliest memories of a car, the earliest memory of a car in particular. But obviously, you lead on and I'll follow, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Reliant Scimitars. They're
nice. That's a nice car, isn't it? I like those cars.
I don't mind them.
Quite a unique shape to them.
Yeah, it's that 2-door glass back window shape, and it was a fiberglass car. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Royal Connection was Princess Anne had one at some stage. So they were always bits of car, weren't they? Bits of this and a bit of that. So it had the Ford engine, and I think it had tail lights off of another Ford or something. It was always one of those cars, and it was one of those cars peculiarly. Obviously, I'm going back to the mid 70s. So I was born in 73, so this would probably have been at best 76 or 77. It was one of those cars that, at its time, it was only probably 4 or 5 years old, but actually felt like you were getting into a car that was 20 years old, because it was, something was hanging off of it, broken on it, it smelt, it was dirty, faded, and didn't work properly.
Yeah.
A lot of those had V8s in, didn't they?
I'm not sure if they had a V8. I think it was the Ford V6 is what because I remember it made a great noise. It had twin pipes out the back.
Yeah.
But it was It was blue. It was a navy blue colour, but I don't remember it being very shiny. I seem to remember it being very matte satin gel coat, as a lot of fiberglass cars were in the 70s.
Probably where the fire had been put out previously on it.
Probably, scorched paint. So that's probably my earliest memory of a car.
So what's your earliest memory of a parent's car?
Well, Dad was a Ford man. I have never owned a Ford in my lifetime. There are Fords that I like, there's Fords that I desire. Considering I grew up around Fords, Dad's earliest car that I can remember was a bright red Cortina GXL, a 5-door. And he bought that brand new, supposedly the year I was born. I was talking to Dad about this on Sunday, and he said he wasn't earning a lot of money, but in 1973, a 3-bedroom semi-detached house was £4,000, and a Ford Cortina was just over £1,000. He said 1,100 and something pounds, and he bought it from Endeavour that was in Brighton at the time. Don't know if you remember the dealership by the railway arches, just past Preston Circus. Yeah. And that seemed to be his go-to Ford dealer. So that was my first memory of an actual car. But in terms of my first car that I actually felt passionate about that my dad owned, he had a Mark II Escort, 1600 Sport, which was like the down market Mexico. It was the carburetted 1600. And it was exciting because it was gold of all colours. Very, very 70s. Because it was a 2-door car, it was slightly cool. And Dad's safety awareness has obviously improved because it had sort of like 3-point harnesses in the back. As we didn't have child seats so much at the time, but we actually had harnesses. So you felt like you were sat in a then rally car. I had dreams of obviously Rothman stickers down the side of it, trying to make it a bit more exciting. But it was a Mark II, and it was on quarter bumpers with spotlights on the front. So he'd given it a go, but being a Ford of the 70s, at about 3 years old, I think in about 1979, it was already time to get your eyes upon P38 filler out and your mesh and repair the arches, because obviously living by the sea, it sort of deteriorated. I also remember in one evening taking the wheels off and rubbing them down. It had those steel wheels with like little black painted inserts in. I remember, Mum coming home, she'd been out somewhere, and he had the newspaper laid out in the lounge, and he'd been in the lounge floor rubbing down the wheels, in preparation of a Halford silver spray can or a can of Holt's at the time to do the wheel silver. But it was one of those cars where it always seemed to have something wrong with it. And we used to take it on summer holidays to France, because obviously living in Newhaven, the natural place to go on holiday was across the channel, and it had these clip-on yellow headlight covers, and he always had a hose set and a spare fan belt. But he seemed to spend most weekends doing something to it, basically to stop the deterioration, I believe.
Sounds like you definitely caught rally fever with some of those accessories. Presumably when your mum got in, he used to give her like a clipboard and say this for the navigation.
Strangely, an early memory was my mum had several attempts at learning to drive in the 70s. And before I was born, there was a story of my mum driving my dad in an Austin 1100 that she managed to drive into a ditch during a driving lesson. But one summer's evening, it was a sort of a threat to us as a kid. Do you want to go to bed early? Do you want to come out with a driving lesson with Mum? And it was like, can we go to bed early, please? It was, it's daylight, but please let us go to bed. And one night we came home. We lived in a very small close, and in the 70s, everybody used to be out mowing the grass and trimming the roses, and the kids used to be out on their bikes. And I remember one evening we come home, and our driveway at the time, it was the only house in the close with a garage. My dad had built a garage on the side of the house, and he built a sloping concrete driveway to the garage, and there was a bit of a hump to get the car back onto the drive. And we'd been out on this driving lesson, and me and my brother was in the back. And I remember my dad saying, little bit of gas, sort of like get it over the curb and get it onto the driveway. My mum accelerated and got the car at about 35 going down this sloping driveway towards the garage door. And he pulled the handbrake on to stop the car. The car stalled. And I can remember all the neighbours coming out, obviously, and the two front fog lights were bent backwards against the garage door. I remember my mum shouting at him, for causing a scene. Well, she was about half a second away going through the garage and coming out the other side.
Did your mum follow through with the lessons? Did she end up passing the test, or did that sort of scar her for life?
Oh, yeah, certainly. She took a test, and she took the test in Eastbourne, and reversing around a corner, she actually touched a tree with the back of the car. These trees that are sort of like half in the road, half on the curb. She actually touched a tree, and somehow she passed. And she had gaps between driving. She didn't drive for about 5 years after passing her test, basically because Mum and Dad only had one car, but there wasn't enough money at the time to have two cars. So Dad would get the training to work. But Dad had a Sierra in the 80s, and we had some white gates on the house. And I remember she'd taken I think she'd taken a swimming or something. She came home and she put the car back on the drive. She managed to hit the white gates with the Sierra because it was a big car. And I remember coming out with Jif, not T-Cut, Jif, trying to get the white off the blue. They were polypropylene bumpers on Sierras at the time that were painted blue. And she was out there with the Jif trying to get the paint off before Dad saw. And so, driving was never her thing. And, again, she probably left it 10 to 15 years before she drove again. And for a brief period, I had a Citroen AX many years ago. When I had my first 911, obviously I had the 911 and I had an everyday car, which was just a Citroen AX run around. My Brighton Basher, I used to run it into Brighton at the weekends. And she drove that, and she drove it down Halford's car park in New Haven just to have a bit of a go of it. And she hit the curb and she said, "What was that?" I said, "Well, you're actually on the pavement." At which point we decided, nah, leave the driving thing. You're just best off being a passenger. Just not her thing.
She sounds like one to avoid on the roads altogether, doesn't she? Let's be honest, and off the roads as well on the drives.
The GIF takes us back to Azim, doesn't it? Who was cleaning his dad's newly painted Fiesta with a scouring.
Yeah. Also reminds me of the sort of thing you'd probably see on TikTok. Take something that's not meant to be used on a car, and look at that. Takes all the dirt off and the paint as well.
Yeah.
My next door neighbour did it to a Metro. I didn't particularly like the woman, and I watched her polishing it with T-Cut, and she couldn't understand why she couldn't get a shine, with T-Cut on her C-Reg Metro. And I just thought, I'm just going to leave this. It's quite good. It's got about 0.02 of a mil of lacquer on it anyway. She'd be through to the bare paint in a minute. So we just let her carry on. It looked great.
Was your dad a bucket and sponge man on the drive, Mark?
Yeah. Dad was always one for looking after the cars, and obviously it sort of gets in the blood. And and obviously I'm not so bad now. In my younger years, I'd spend lots of time cleaning cars. But the best car cleaning story I got is my nan used to. She had funny enough a Mark II Escort as well. She had the Escort Gear,
nice,
which was a 5-door one, beautiful blue colour, chrome bumpers, and had the black vinyl roofs.
What'd you get with the Gear? A bit of electric windows, power steering, that sort of thing? Or?
Not on Mark II.
No, that's true, actually. Yeah.
I think you got some badges. Yeah, you got some badges and a vinyl roof. I think that's what the Gear meant. And it had chrome rims that went round the outside of the steel wheels as well with the Gear. And it was probably another £1,000. But she used to wash the car every Sunday without fail. We used to stay there as a kid with Fairy Liquid, which is probably, as you know, 90% salt. Again, living in Brighton, the last thing you want to clean your car with is Fairy Liquid. But to get the shine on it, Pledge. So she used to, the chrome bumpers, the vinyl roof, the windows, everything used to get every Sunday a good coat of Pledge, and you could literally see rain. It was like Rain-X. The water couldn't touch it. This car, it had 3/4 of an inch of beeswax all over it. So a car cleaned with Pledge.
That's fantastic. That is a My Dad's Car first, isn't it? Pledge on the paintwork.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, that's it. It's a tip. So everybody out there that's been buying Maguire's and sort of this Canuba wax, forget it.
Idiots. Yeah.
£1.99 can of Pledge, can't go wrong.
It's funny, isn't it? I always think Pledge got quite a nice aroma to it, I always thought. And a lot of these car care products, they put nice smelling things in, so you use more of it. Good visions of your gran.
Without fail, my nan was a traffic light air freshener person. Do you remember the traffic light air fresheners?
Yeah.
So her car was never without a set of traffic lights hanging off the mirrors. It was always the amber light that had the bulgy plastic bit in the middle that was filled with the scent. So it was
really screams 90s taxis, doesn't it? Yeah, the traffic light air freshener.
A nice traffic light air freshener. But so my nan was always one for looking after her cars, and my granddad, he was not a car person. He was the anti-car in terms of he'd use a car, and he always had very nice cars, but was totally disinterested in cars. Cars were a tool for him. He was a senior manager at a large Brighton furniture company, and he always had very nice company cars through the 70s. So my earliest memories of his cars was a Rover P6 with a Safari spare wheel on the boot lid, and that it wasn't a leather interior, it had that vinyl interior. So again, when it got hot, you just got that nice Austin Rover, that Morris smell of cooking vinyl
and skin.
Yeah, that skin. Yeah,
and Pledge.
That was it. Yeah, that hot, and you get in the car and it was sort of like in shorts, and it was scorching up the back of your legs, and it was Yeah, not an aircon car, but that one had the 2.6 engine in it because they had the V8 option for that, but this one was only the 2.6 petrol. Then he followed it on with a Granada, a white Granada, like the Sweeney type of Granada.
Sweeney, yeah.
Yeah, with the curvy sort of, the Mark 1 Granada. And I remember the nice big chrome windy handle. It had the full Webasto sunroof that you could wind all the way back. And obviously, as it was a 70s, as a 7-year-old, you could stand on the rear seat, standing out the sunroof, doing 60 mile an hour on dual carriageways because that was acceptable then. And nobody used to bat an eyelid, so it was like a tank commander.
Was it be a 2.8 in that one?
Yeah, I think it was the 2.8. Again, that was the V6, and that was a nice grunty car. I remember that made a good noise. And then he went back to his Rovers, and he had a Rover SD1 in mustard, a very nice R-Edge mustard coloured one, again with a nice brown dashboard. And he stuck with Rovers for a bit, and we used to go into Brighton on a Saturday into the town, and you used to park in the then Churchill Square car park. You used to drive the car forward, and basically until you hit the wall, that was his indication to stop. So you drive the car forward until there was a thud and the car hit the wall, because that's obviously that was bumpers for, and that did him all right up until the mid-80s when he had his first Montego, and he did that, and it was just a pile of crumbled ABS on the ground. He picked the car up on a Friday, drove it into the wall on the Saturday, back into the body shop on the Monday for a new front bumper.
Bit of a downward turn, really, from Granadas and Rovers to a Montego, isn't it? I always think with Granadas, like if you pick one up from a dealer back then, they'd hand you the keys and a box of cigarettes and just sort of say, get stuck in.
He used to smoke cigars.
Lovely.
So the cars were always full of that aroma of cigars. He was the sort of guy that used to wear a suit on a Saturday and Sunday as well. So his shirts would always be, full of burn holes in his nylon ties, where the cigar ash had dropped on them. So his cars always had that Castella sort of, or King Edward smell.
Nice. Yeah, classics, yeah.
Yeah, classics, that was it. So, but considering his car history, I shouldn't be into cars at all. But no, Dad was always a car fan and always influential in cars. And so, after the Escort, he moved to Vauxhall, went to a Chevette, a white Chevette, and which he didn't have that very long. He had a quite a nasty accident in it way home from Lewes to Newhaven, and he ended up in hospital, quite badly injured in that car. And again, as a car memories go, I remember, I think my brother Glenn was a baby. It'd be about 1977. It was a cold winter's evening, and it was a dark night. And there was at the time, before mobile phones, Dad hadn't come home from work, and Mum was a bit panicky as to where he was. And inevitably, there was a knock on the door, and there was this. I remember this tall traffic cop there, bearded, very stereotypical traffic cop of the 70s. Beard, white hat on, the brow cut down like the sergeant major.
Cigarette. That's
it. Yeah, stand there. And I remember holding up a bag, like a mesh shopping bag, and it had a bottle of Camp coffee that was smashed in it that had been leaking. He held this up and he said to my mum, he said, "Would this be yours?" And she's like, "Oh, what's happening?" He said, "Well, I'm assuming this is you're expecting this shopping." He said, "Yeah, your husband's obviously been involved in an accident, and you better come with me." And I remember the next door neighbours coming round, and I remember his car was funny enough, what sticks in your head, it was an MGB banana split. It had the stripe down the side, and it had the box on top with the illuminated blue police sign on it with the acorn blue light on the top. And I remember as a kid, that was more exciting to me than what was actually going on. It's your dad's been involved in an accident. He's not too good, and getting excited about the MGB outside. So that obviously says something about me.
So the police car was an MGB.
The police car was an MGB. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And it had a triangular. I could draw that car from memory today outside the house. It had an orange stripe down the side with a blue border on it. It's what traffic police were driving back in the mid-70s. Those acorn flashing lights, the stereotypical, lights at the time. There was no Nina, no siren, the light wasn't on, but it was just this illuminated blue police box on the roof. And I remember the neighbour coming round. Funny enough, I remember next day going through to see my dad, and she had a Triumph Herald, of all things, and that had a bungee strap to keep the bonnet closed.
So they tilt, don't they?
Yeah, they tilt forward. So where obviously the fixings had rotted away, it was a 60s car back in the 70s. A car at 10 years old in the 70s was a car that was crumbling away.
Can't imagine the terror if you're driving along and the Herald bonnet just comes up. Being blindfolded, isn't it?
Yeah, just a blind. Yeah, that's the whole bonnet flipping. Stop, brake hard, and the bonnet opens. But so cars for me have always been there, from my earliest memories. And then obviously, you move forward. And it's cars for me seem to be in bands of memories. They seem to be in eras and genres. So you've got your 70s, your 80s, your 90s, noughties, and obviously, and you tend to carry it with you. Obviously, by my garage full of stuff on periods sort of like the mid '80s through to the mid '90s, probably my most influential on cars. Although I've got a long list of cars I'd like to own, from the older days. But I think the thing is sometimes you look back with nostalgia and you think, do I really want to go back there? For me, the car's got to be enjoyable to drive now. If I don't enjoy driving it, there are probably one or two exceptions. But if it's not a driver's car or something that I get a lot of feedback from, I'm probably less likely to want to own it. But saying that, my dad had an Alfa Sud, which was that's another car you could stand and watch and disintegrate. That would you could, that great sounding car, great driver's car, the Alfa Sud. But the Cloverleaf he had. But again, that was a car you literally, you fill it. You'd have to spend the weekend putting filler in it, and sell it before another bit disintegrated, or it was just not designed for the Sussex air.
Any memories of music in the cars?
For me, music was really on the other side of the family, on my mum's side of the family. My granddad on that side, not particularly close to my granddad, but he was a big music fan in the car, and probably before your time, you always had a radio in the car, but having a tape player in the car, obviously the 8-tracks were the first things that come out. I don't really remember them, but certainly cassette players. And I remember this Pi cassette player that he had, and it was in a Nissan Stanza in 1982. It's then a new car, and it had the radio player, but he had this Pi player that was probably fitted by Hewitts at the time. So it was screwed on, and he used to park it and leave in Brighton, and he had this orange duster he used to drape over it. So it was like,
what a nans.
Surely nobody's going to figure out what's under there. So it was a bright yellow crook lock and a yellow duster over his tape player. And remember those awful box shelf speakers? You had Pi speakers that would go on the parcel shelf.
Yeah. Goodman's.
Yeah, that was Goodman's ones. Yeah, you go Goodman's. But yeah,
I'd completely forgotten about the brand Pi. I remember I used to have a TV in my room. My first TV was Pi.
That was it, like a Y-shaped logo, and it P the Y. Yeah.
Thinking back about how thick the glass was on that Pi TV, it was like 3 inches thick.
Yeah. But in terms of his music, he had a very diverse musical choice, and and he was always on tapes. And I remember every day, if I was staying with them, he'd take 4 or 5 tapes out of his revolving tape rack that used to be on the sideboard on the lounge, and it would be everything from ABBA to Slim Whitman. So you'd be in the car 1 minute listening to whistling country tunes. Next thing, you'd have a bit of Donna Summer or a bit of ABBA, and yeah, it was quite an unusual music chase. But music in cars, yeah, definitely. And in later years, obviously, I was growing up and getting into my own cars. It was always, I've got to go to Hewitt's, got to get the stereo put in, acoustic shelves, and got to have the Alpine again. I'm buying Alpine, CD interchanges to go back in the Golfs. All this stuff that we used to buy back in the day that you go to Hewitt's for and get them to install. We're back buying it now and putting it back in the cars as we have it. You can't beat those 6 illuminated Alpine buttons that glow green on the dash. But that's it. You knew you made it when you had an Alpine.
They were highly desirable, weren't they? Car radios for thieves.
Yeah, that was it. And obviously hanging out down Madeira Drive, there were certain people that remain nameless that you could get one from that was still warm.
If we go back to so you mentioned kind of holidays to France, and something kind of Ben mentioned a few episodes ago. So if you take us back to kind of holidays to France when you were a kid, maybe pick one of your parents' cars. What was happening? What were you? Who was in the car? Where were you off to?
We always invariably, obviously, being in New Haven, the ferry straight across the front, it was easy. So that was always part of the holiday, was the ferry trip. So Dad picked up a brand new from Endeavour again, a Mark III. That was a Mark III Escort in Sunburst Red, and it came without the sunroof, and it only came with one wing mirror. At the time, it was an option. I think it was about 30 quid. I remember Dad getting excited because it was like, I can fit the wing mirror myself. So I remember him bringing it home in a cardboard box from Ford, and again painting the headlights orange and putting the electrical tape on the headlights. But I remember the Friday before, because it was hot, obviously no air conditioning in the cars then, they put an aftermarket sunroof in. And I remember this, the excitement of the aftermarket sunroof and the lift out option, the piece of glass, you could actually lift it out. So you could have it with the sunroof in or with the sunroof out. And I remember that happened literally the day before we went on holiday. So we drive down through France, with the sunroof in, harnesses again. And, it was a 3-door car at the time, no aircon, invariably very hot. And we were sat on pillows, and, you'd have to put your legs on crates of French beer in the footwells and stuff. So it was one of those things where you travel down through France. If I take my boy anywhere now, he's in the Audi A6 with the aircon on, with his headphones on and he's moaning how much longer it's going to be. You haven't got a clue, sunshine, until you've been in a Mark III Escort with non-wind down windows, 100 degrees heat going through France, sat on a crate of beer. You've got nothing to worry about. But yeah, lots of driving memories down through France, and also in my mid-teens, trips to Le Mans. That was always a big thing for us. The annual pilgrimage down to Le Mans. Driving down through France, and some good stories there. And I remember going in a Mark II Grandad at the time. Estate with my dad's friend, going down in France and driving down the Mulsanne Straight before they put the kinks in. So that was a big thing, driving down. They were great times, and a period of racing which I don't think we'll ever see the lights again. That Group C era of, no rules barred, big engines, the Porsche 962s, 956s, then into 962s, the Saab C9s, the XJR 8s and 9 Jaguar Le Mans cars, silk cut colours. So they were good times. We did that for a few years, sort of like, 87 through to like 91. And obviously a historic Jaguar win, and obviously Mazda's first win at Le Mans. So, but yeah, lots of fun times travelling down through France in cars. And, I remember my granddad taking us to the Isle of Wight in a Ford Sierra Cotswolds, according to him, not a Cosworth. Yeah, it was his business partner at the time's car. It's a silly thing. It's a black Ford thing. It's got a thing across the back and you can't see out the back window. So when you try and reverse, me and my brother were just creaming ourselves. We were so excited that he's got this new Cosworth. And it's a silly car. It's fast. A Ford Cotswolds. Again, that's how uncar cool he was. He just had the use of this car. And it's just...
It's like if you're buying a Cosworth from Turkey, isn't it, on holiday or something?
Yeah, that's it. Total lack of interest in cars. And me and my brother sat in this Sierra Cosworth, lapping it up. And I remember putting it on the Isle of Wight ferry, and like everybody was just, at the time, we're talking 1986, 87, to see a black Ford Cosworth at the time. It was like, oh.
Was it Sapphire?
No, it was the 3-door.
I always preferred the Sapphire, personally. I know the money-wise, the 3-doors go for insane, don't they, now? But I don't know, I always liked the Sapphire, personally.
The Sapphire was okay once it got 4-wheel drive. In 2-wheel drive, it was pretty horrible. I drove a white one, because obviously, again, the traffic police had them at the time. They had the 4x4s, and a friend of mine's brother had a white one, and that was a 2-wheel drive car. And it was just a Sierra. He drove it round, and it was only when he hit about 4,000 RPM, and there was all hell let loose.
Yeah.
There was nothing in it to tell you, but it was of its time. It was very creaky. But it was desirable car nowadays. Obviously, the 3-door. Yeah, that's on my list. I'd love to own a white 3-door Sierra Cosworth. And my granddad went out and bought. I don't know whether the car impressed him. He went out and bought. I remember the car D520 YLD, and it was the only yellow Sierra I can ever remember Ford producing. It must have been one of these cars they painted on a Friday afternoon as a test colour, and decided, no, it looked awful when they never put it into production. But somehow we managed to buy this car from Endeavour. And he had the, you remember the Sierra Cosworth, you had the standard Cosworth, had the single spoiler, and the RS 500 had the double spoiler, had the rubber spoiler down below. Well, he got the rubber spoiler fitted as an accessory to this brand new D520 YLD yellow Sierra. So it was a yellow Sierra on black bumpers with this black spoiler. And I remember not long after we took it, I think it was Windsor Safari Park, or it might have been Longley. And I remember a monkey biting the spoiler, the rubber spoiler, and taking this like a Jaws bite shape out of it. And I remember to the day he sold that car, he drove it round with the monkey-sized bite shape out the rubber spoiler. Yeah, and it's stuff like that sticks in your head, So yeah, but that was awful. That car, truly bad colour. I don't even know what the colour was. I think you could get Fiestas in the same colour in a D-Reg, and I think you might have been able to get Escorts in it. But I certainly cannot remember ever seeing another yellow Sierra ever on the road. It never happened.
No, for good reason.
But I've got plenty more if you want them, boys. You just say when you've had enough.
Quite a catalogue of exciting cars there, though, isn't it?
Well,
quite a different range of vehicles as well.
For me, I've always been passionate about cars, and Dad unfortunately never really had. Grandad had the money to spend on cars, but never spent them on the right cars. Dad generally bought cars that were sensible family cars, and for sensible, practical family use. But he always wanted a Mark I Lotus Cortina. And, even in the 80s, they were getting out of reach. And I remember one evening going to Seaford to see a South African guy that had a Mark I Lotus Cortina. And I don't know how we'd got the connection, but we went over there and there was a light metallic green Mark II 2-door Ford Cortina the squarer second generation Lotus Cortina, and it was in this light metallic green with the olive green stripe on the side of it with the Lotus badges on it. And it spent most of its life in South Africa. It had been a car that he posed the guy had tracked or raced over there. And the conversation led one thing to another, where Dad didn't shake hands, but more or less put the deal together to buy that car. And at the time, it was on four-spoke Revolution alloys, black one. So it had the polished outer rims. And I thought, again, it was a really cool car because it was slightly lowered for the time, obviously, because it spent a bit of time on the track. And I remember his excitement at, talking about this car and coming home. And it came to the point to tell my mum of his intentions, and it soon went from a Lotus Cortina to a kitchen. That was the end of his pipe dream to ever own, the car that he almost ever wanted. As soon as Mum found out that was his intention, if you've got the money for a Lotus Cortina, I want a new kitchen, and that was it. And that was the end of it. It was a white B&Q melamine kitchen with a grey inset stripe in an early faux shaker style. That was the end of it.
Moral to that story: just buy the car, isn't it, and just turn up with it, and then it's done.
Well, I think that's
and risk divorce, but
yeah, and risk divorce. Yeah, that's it. But I think he's unfortunately, never really got the car that he wanted. But say growing up, when my brother hit the teenage years, and we had car after car after car. I think he enjoyed certain cars that we owned because we were always, he shared his cars with us. When I was 17, I had a Beetle, and I love my cow look lowered Beetle. But if you ever had to drive anywhere, you're doing very one of Dad's, Sierras or Rovers or whatever he had at the time. And then in part exchange, when we got decent cars like, Renault 5 turbos, Mark 1 RS turbos, like my brother had, or my Corrado VR6, which I still own a Corrado VR6. Dad really enjoyed that. That's a car that Dad, out of all the cars I owned, I had a 911, I had all sorts of stuff. Of all the cars I ever had when I was living at home, my Corrado VR6 was his go-to car, and it was all like, it was a bit of an unusual, it's like, son, can I borrow your car sort of thing. It was the car that he never owned, that he should have owned. In fact, he does own technically, because I borrowed the money off him to buy a Corrado.
He'll probably just come and repossess it one weekend, won't he, without Key, son.
Yeah, that's it.
Just don't let your mum have a go.
Staying away with it. Yeah, she'd be out with a jiff on it, trying to clean the scratches off the bumpers.
Or doing Dukes of Hazzard on the drive.
Yeah, burn out on the drive. That's it. You got it. But Andy relates, it's cars that hit you and stick with you. I mean, the 944 thing. My neighbour had a 944, a B888 Doc. I can remember the number plate on that car, a black 944, and that car stuck with me. It was a Porsche. It had the linen logo Porsche seats in it, and I remember that was my first ever Porsche show.
Yeah,
I went in that car to a Porsche show, and I was just smitten. The 944 to me, I'm a 911 man through and through. But people say, "Oh, it's the poor man's Porsche." That to me, it was the first proper connection I had with Porsche, and I love that car. And hence, I own a similar car now, and I'm going to really look forward to enjoying that car. But that black 944 and its cookie cutters, to me, was the nuts in its day. Funny enough, I've still got the bonnet from it. She had a minor accident in it, and it had a little crink in the bonnet, and the bonnet was only minor damage. It was repaired by a local body shop, and they replaced the bonnet. And the bonnet came home, and it stayed in the garden for a few months. And just over the fence, I said to Carolyn, "What are you doing? What are you doing with the bonnet?" "Oh, I don't really know. I don't know why I've got it. It's just that it's a genuine bonnet, and if I thought it's only minor damage and they've replaced it, I'll keep the bonnet." I said, "Can I have it?" And I think it's still behind the shed.
Probably rotten to pieces.
Yeah. So a car in pieces. So the fact that I owned a bit of a 944 when I was about 18, it was quite exciting.
I'm going to have to stop you, Mark, because I'm going to have to jump back to work in a sec.
Same here.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for joining us and spending a bit of time chatting.
Pleasure.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. That's good fun.
Thanks for humouring me.
That's all right. Yeah, some good stories. So, thank you.
Cheers, Andy. Cheers, John. And take care. Bye.
So Mark likes a chat.
He does like a chat, doesn't he? I really enjoyed his ability to recite the registration plates at speed. Like, so much so that I had to sort of think about what he was saying. And I was, he's talking about a registration plate.
Yeah, he's got those locked down, hasn't he? And obviously in association with Ford through his family. His granddad with the Ford Cotswold. Quite amusing.
His name of the pledge.
Yeah. And his mum putting it through the garage door, pretty much.
Yeah, I was thinking when he was speaking about the Escort wing mirrors, I was going to say that's kind of handy. Saves his mum knocking that one off.
So, that was Mark. That was If It Works. season 2, episode 1, which is we're off to the next season, which is great.
Very good. I'd imagine by the time this launches, we'll have 10,000 followers.
10,000 followers. Obviously, what we'll have to put in retrospectively is a massive thank you to everyone who's supported us, bought us a coffee, or given us a bump start.
Yeah. And looking forward to Jensen Button coming on in season 3.
I need to make that call. So, and then, we'll have Ian right at the door.
It's a matter of time, isn't it, now, I think? Yeah.
It's going to happen. So, thank you very much to Mark. Thank you for everyone for listening. Thank you for all the support. Thanks to you, John.
No worries. Pleasure.
And we'll roll some credits.
Thanks for listening to My Dad's Car Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please click subscribe, leave us a review, and follow us on social media. If you'd like to support us further, you can buy us a coffee or sign up to give us a monthly bump start. You'll find details on our website, mydadscar.co.uk. Bye for now.